David Bowie, a Life's Retrospect, an Entertainment Report special. Good evening, everyone. This is your boy, Mr. Downtown Ray Mello. Welcome to this special edition of the Entertainment Report as we look back at the life and times of David Bowie, the legendary rock icon and actor who died on Sunday in New York at the age of 69 after an 18-month battle with lung cancer. We're going to look back at his extraordinary career as a musician and actor as well. Bowie was a British singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, record producer, arranger, painter, and actor. He was a figure in popular music for over 4 decades and was considered by critics and other musicians as an innovator, particularly for his work in the 1970s. His androgynous appearance was an iconic element of his image, principally in the 1970s and 1980s. Born and raised in Brixton, South London, Bowie developed an early interest in music, although his attempts to succeed as a pop star during much of the 1960s was frustrated. Space Oddity became his first top 5 entry on the UK singles charts after it was released in July 1969. After a 3-year period of experimentation, he reemerged in 1972 during the glam rock era with his flamboyant and androgynous alter ego Ziggy Stardust. The character was spearheaded by his single Starman and album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Bowie's impact at that time, as described by biographer David Buckley, changed the core belief of the rock music of its day and created perhaps the biggest cult in popular culture. The relatively short-lived Ziggy persona proved to be one facet of a career marked by reinvention, music innovation, and visual presentation. In 1975, Bowie achieved his first major American crossover success with the #1 single Fame and the album Young Americans, which the singer characterized as plastic soul. The sound constituted a radical shift in style that initially alienated many of his UK devotees. He then co-founded the expectations of both his record label and his American audiences by recording the electronic-inflected album Low, the first of 3 collaborations with Brian Eno. Low in 1977, Heroes 1977, and Lodger 1979. The so-called Berlin Trilogy albums all reached the UK top 5 and received lasting critical praise. After an uneven commercial success in the late 1970s, Bowie had UK #1 hits with the 1980 single Ashes to Ashes, its parent album Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, and Under Pressure, a 1981 collaboration with Queen. He then reached a new commercial peak in 1983 with Let's Dance, which yielded several successful singles. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Bowie continued to experiment with musical styles, including Blue Eye Soul, industrial, adult contemporary, and jungle. Bowie also had a successful but sporadic film career. His acting roles included the eponymous character in The Man Who Fell to Earth in 1976, Major Clears in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence in 1983, Jareth the Goblin King in Labyrinth in 1986, and Pontius Pilate in Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ in 1988. His last film role was portraying Nikola Tesla in The Prestige in 2006, among other films and television appearances and cameos. Bowie stopped touring after his 2003-2004 reality tour and last performed live at a charity event in 2006. On January 8, 2016, date of Bowie's 69th birthday, his final studio album, Black Star, was released. He died 2 days later. Buckley said of Bowie, his influence has been unique in popular culture. He has pre-animated and altered more lives than any comparable figure. In the BBC's 2002 poll of 100 Greatest Britons, Bowie was placed at number 29. Throughout his career, he sold an estimated 140 million records worldwide. In the UK, he was awarded 9 platinum album certifications, 11 gold and 8 silver, and in the US, 5 platinum and 7 gold certifications. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996. Bowie was born in Brixton, South London. His mother, Margaret Maggie Peggy Burns from Kent, worked as a waitress, while his father, Haywood Stenton John Jones from Yorkshire, was a promotions officer for the children's charity Barnardo's. The Family lived at 40 Stansfield Road near the border of the South London areas of Brixton and Stockwell. Bowie attended Stockwell Infant School until he was 6 years old, acquiring a reputation as a gifted and single-minded child and a defiant brawler. In 1953, Bowie moved with his family to the suburb of Bromley, where 2 years later he progressed to Burnt Ash Junior School. His voice was considered adequate by the school choir, and he demonstrated above-average abilities in playing the recorder. At the age of 9, his dancing during the newly introduced music and movement class was strikingly imaginative. Teachers called him his interpretations vividly artistic and his poise astonishing from a child. That same year, his interest in music was further stimulated when his father brought home a collection of American 45s by artists including Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, the Platters, Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, and Little Richard. Upon listening to Tutti Frutti, Bowie would later say, "I had heard God." Presley's impact on him was likewise empathetic. "I saw a cousin of mine dance to Hound Dog, and I had never seen her get up and be moved so much by anything. It really impressed me, the power of the music. I started getting records immediately after that." By the end of the following year, he had taken up the ukulele and T-chess bass and begun to participate in skiffle sessions with friends, and had started to play the piano. Meanwhile, his stage presentation of numbers by both Presley and Chuck Berry, complete with gyrations and tributes to the original artist to his local Wolf Cub group, was described as mesmerizing, like someone from another planet. Failing his 11-plus exam at the conclusion of his Burnt Ash Junior education, Bowie joined Bromley's Technical High School. Bowie studied art, music design, including layout and typesetting. After Terry Burns, his half-brother, introduced him to modern jazz, his enthusiasm for players like Charlie Mingus and John Coltrane led his mother to give him a plastic alto saxophone in 1961. He was soon receiving lessons from a local musician. Bowie received a serious injury at school in 1962 when his friend George Underwood punched him in the left eye during a fight over a girl. Doctors feared he would become blind in that eye. After a series of operations during a form of hospitalization, his doctor determined that the damage could not be fully repaired, and Bowie was left with faulty depth perception and a permanently dilated pupil. Despite their altercation, Underwood and Bowie remained good friends, and Underwood went on to create the artwork for Bowie's early albums. Graduating from his plastic saxophone to a real instrument in 1962, Bowie formed his first band at the age of 15. Playing guitar, bass, rock and roll at local youth gatherings and weddings, the Comrades had a varying lineup of between 4 and 8 members, Underwood among them. When Bowie left the technical school the following year, he informed his parents of his intentions to become a pop star. His mother promptly arranged his employment as an electrician mate. Frustrated by his bandmates' limited aspirations, Bowie left the Comrades and joined another band, the King Bees. He wrote to the newly successful washing machine entrepreneur John Bloom, inviting him to do for us what Brian Epstein has done for the Beatles and make another million. Bloom did not respond to the offer, but his referral to Dick James's partner Leslie Cohn led to Bowie's first personal management contract. Cohn quickly began to promote Bowie. The singer's debut single, Lisa Jane, credited Davy Jones and the King Bees, had no commercial success. Dissatisfied with the King Bees and their repertoire of Howlin' Wolf and Willie Dixon blues numbers, Bowie quit the band less than a month later to join the Manish Boys, another blues outfit who incorporated folk and soul. Bowie recalled, "I used to dream of being their Mick Jagger. I Pity the Fool was no more successful than Liza Jane," and Bowie soon moved on again to join the Lower Third, a blues trio strongly influenced by The Who. Your Got a Habit of Leaving fared no better, signaling the end of Cohn's contract. Declaring that he would exit the pop world to study mime at Sadler's Well, Bowie nevertheless remained with the Lower Third. His new manager, Ralph Horton, later instrumental in his transition to solo artist, soon witnessed Bowie's move to yet another group, The Buzz, yielding the singer's fifth unsuccessful single release, Do Anything You Say. While with The Buzz, Bowie also joined the Riot Squad. Their recordings, which included a Bowie number and Velvet Underground materials, went unreleased. Ken Pitt, introduced by Horton, took over as Bowie's manager. Dissatisfied with his stage name as Davy or Davy Jones, which in the mid-1960s invited confusion with Davy Jones of the Monkees, Bowie renamed himself after the 19th century American frontiersman Jim Bowie and the knife he had popularized. His April 1967 solo single, The Laughing Gnome, using speed-up, thus high-pitched vocals, failed to chart. Released 6 weeks later, his album debut, David Bowie, and Agama Lag of pop psychedelia music hall met the same fate. It was his last release for 2 years. Bowie met dancer Lindsay Kemp in 1967 and enrolled in his dance class at the London Dance Central. He commented in 1972 that meeting Kemp was when his interest in image really blossomed. He lived on his emotions. He was a wonderful influence. His day-to-day life was the most theatrical thing I have ever seen ever. It was everything I thought Bohemia probably was. I joined the circus. Studying from the dramatic arts under Kemp, from avant-garde theater to mime to commedia dell'arte, Bowie became immersed in the creation of persona to present to the world. Satirizing life in a British prison, meanwhile, the Bowie pen Over the Wall We Go became a 1967 single for Oscar. Another Bowie composition, Silly Boy Blue, was released by Billy Fury the following year. In July 1968, Kemp choreographed a dance scene for the BBC play The Pistol Shot in the Theatre 625 series and used Bowie with the dancer Hermione Farringale. The pair began dating and moved into a London flat together. Playing acoustic guitar, Farringale formed a group with Bowie and bassist John Hutchinson. Between September 1968 and early 1969, the trio gave a small number of concerts combining folk, Mersey beat, poetry, and mime. Bowie and Farringale broke up in early 1969 when she went to Norway to take a part in the film Song of Norway. This had an impact on him, and several songs such as Letters to Hermione and Life on Mars reference her. And for the video company Where Are We Now, he wore a t-shirt with the words Song for Norway. They were last together in January 1969 for the filming of Love You Till Tuesday, a 30-minute film not released until 1984, intended as a vehicle to promote him, featuring performances from Bowie's repertoire, including an as-yet unreleased Space Oddity. After the breakup with Farringale, Bowie moved in with Mary Finnegan as her lodger. During this period, he appeared in a Lions Made ice cream commercial, but was rejected for another by Kit Kat. In February and March 1969, he undertook a short tour with Mark Bolan's duo T-Rex as third on the bill, performing a mime act. On July 11, 1969, Space Oddity was released 5 days ahead of the Apollo 11 launch and reached the top 5 in the UK. Continuing the divergence from rock and roll and blues begun by his work with Farringale, Bowie joined forces with Finnegan, Christina Ostrom, and Barry Jackson to run a folk club on Sunday nights at the Three Tons Pub in Beckenham High Street. Influenced by the Arts Lab movement, this developed into the Beckenham Arts Lab and became extremely popular. The Arts Lab hosted a free festival in the local park, the subject of his song Memory of a Free Festival. Bowie's second album followed in November, originally issued in the UK as David Bowie. It caused some confusion with his predecessor of the same name, and in the early US release was instead titled Man of Words, Man of Music. It was re-released internationally in 1972 by RCA as Space Oddity. Featuring philosophical post-hippie lyrics of peace, love, and morality, its acoustic folk rock occasionally fortified by harder rock, the album was not a commercial success at the time of its release. Bowie married Angela Barnett in April 1969. They married within a year. Her impact on him was immediate, and her involvement in his career far-reaching, leaving manager Ken Pitt with limited influence, which he found frustrating. Having established himself as a solo artist with Space Oddity, Bowie began to sense a lacking, a full-time band for gigs and recording, people he could relate to personally. The shortcoming was underlined by his artistic rivalry with Mark Bolan, who was at the time acting as his session guitarist. A band was duly assembled. John Cambridge, a drummer Bowie met at the Arts Lab, was joined by Tony Visconti on bass and Mick Ronson on electric guitar. Known as The Hype, the bandmates created characters from themselves, wore elaborate costumes that prefigured the glam style of the Spiders from Mars. After a disastrous opening gig at the London Roundhouse, they reverted to a configuration presented Bowie as a solo artist. Their initial studio work was marred by a heated disagreement between Bowie and Cambridge over the latter's drumming style. Matters came to a head when Bowie, in rage, accused, "You're fucking up my album." Cambridge summarily quit and was replaced by Mick Woodsmansey. Not long after, in a move that resulted in years of litigation, at the conclusion of which Bowie was forced to pay Pitt's compensation, the singer fired his manager, replacing him with Donny DeFries. The studio sessions continued and resulted in Bowie's third album, The Man Who Sold the World, in 1970, which contained references to schizophrenia, paranoia, and delusion. Characterized by the heavy rock sound of his new backing band, it was marked a departure from the acoustic guitar and folk rock style established by Space Oddity. To promote it in the U.S., Mercury Records financed a coast-to-coast publicity tour in which Bowie, between January and February of 1979, was interviewed by radio stations and the media. Exploring his androgynous appearance, the original cover of the UK version, unveiled 2 months later, depicted the singer wearing a dress. Taking the garment with him, he wore it during interviews to the approval of critics, including Rolling Stone's John Mendelsohn, who described him as ravishing, almost disconcertingly resemblance of Lauren Bacall. And in the street, to mixed reaction, including laughter, in the case of one male pedestrian producing a gun telling Bowie to kiss my ass. During the tour, Bowie's observation of two seminal American proto-punk artists led him to develop a concept that eventually found form in the Ziggy Stardust character, a melding of the persona of Iggy Pop with the music of Lou Reed, producing the ultimate pop idol. A girlfriend recalled his scrawling notes on a cocktail napkin about a crazy rock star named Iggy or Ziggy, and on his return to England, he declared his intention to create a character who looks like he landed from Mars. Dory, which was released in 1971, found Visconti, Bowie's producer and bassist, supplanted in both roles by Kent Scott and Trevor Bolder, respectively. The album saw the partial return of the fiery pop singer of Space Oddity, with life bearers such as Kooks, a song written for his son Duncan Jones, born May 30th of that year. Elsewhere, the album explored more serious themes and found Bowie playing unusually directed home homage to his influences with songs for Bob Dylan, Andy Warhol, and Queen Bitch, a Velvet Underground pastiche. It was not a significant commercial success at the time. Dressed in a striking costume, his hair dyed red, Bowie launched his Ziggy Stardust stage show with the Spiders from Mars, Ronson, Boulder, and Woodsmansey at the Tubby Jug Pub in Tollsworth on February 10, 1972. The show was hugely popular, catapulting him to stardom as he toured the UK over the course of the next 6 months and creating, as described by Buckley, a cult of Bowie that was unique in its influence, lasting longer, and has been more creative than perhaps almost any other force within pop fandom. The rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars in 1972 combined the hard rock elements of The Man Who Sold the World with the lighter experimental rock and pop of Hunky, was released in June. Starman, issued as an April single ahead of the album, was to cement Bowie's UK breakthrough. Both single and album charted rapidly following his July Top of the Pops performance of the song. The album, which remained in the charts for 2 years, was soon joined there by the 6-month-old Hunky. At the same time, the non-album singles John, I'm Only Dancing, and All the Young Dudes, a song he wrote and produced for Mott the Hoople, were successful in the UK. The Ziggy Stardust tour continued to the United States. Bowie contributed background vocals to Lou Reed's 1972 solo breakthrough Transformer, co-producing the album with Mick Ronson. His own Aladdin Sane in 1973 topped the UK charts, his first #1 album. Described by Bowie as Ziggy Goes to America, it contained songs he wrote while traveling and across the U.S. during the early part of the Ziggy tour, which now continued to Japan to promote the new album. Aladdin Sane spawned the UK top 5 singles The Genie and Drive-In Saturday. Bowie's love of acting led his total immersion into the characters he created for his music. He said once, offstage I'm a robot, onstage I achieve emotion. It's probably why I prefer dressing up as Ziggy to being David. With satisfaction came severe personal difficulties. Acting the same role over an extended period, it became impossible for him to separate Ziggy Stardust and later the Thin White Duke from his own character offstage. Ziggy, Bowie said, wouldn't leave me alone for years. That was when it all started to go sour. My whole personality was affected. It became very dangerous. I really did have doubts doubts about my sanity. His later Ziggy shows, which included songs from both Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane, were ultra-theatrical affairs filled with shocking stage moments such as Bowie stripped down to a sumo wrestling loincloth or stimulating oral sex with Ronson's guitar. Bowie toured and gave press conferences as Ziggy before a dramatic and abrupt onstage retirement at London's Hammersmith Odeon on July 3, 1973. Footage for the final show was released the same year for the film Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. After breaking up with the Spiders from Mars, Bowie attempted to move on from his Ziggy persona. His back catalog was now highly sought after. The Man Who Sold the World had been re-released in 1972, along with Space Oddity. Life on Mars from Dory was released in June 1973 and made number 3 on the UK singles charts. Entering the same charts in September, Bowie's novelty record from 1967, The Laughing Gnome, reached number 6. Pin-Ups, a collection of covers of his 1960 favorites, followed in October, producing a UK number 3 hit in Sorrows, and it itself peaked at number 1, making David Bowie the best-selling act in 1973 in the UK. It brought the total number of Bowie albums concurrently in the UK chart to 6. Bowie moved to the U.S. in 1974, initially staying in New York City before settling in Los Angeles. Diamond Dogs, which was released in 1974, parts of which found him heading towards soul and funk, was the product of two distinct ideas: a musical based on a wild future in a post-apocalyptic city and setting George Orwell's 1984 to music. The album went on to number 1 in the UK and spawned the hits Rebel Rebel and Diamond Dogs, and number 5 in the US. To promote it, Bowie launched the Diamond Dogs tour, visiting cities in North America between June and December of 1974. Choreographed by Tony Basil and lavishly produced with theatrical special effects, the high-budget stage production was filmed by Alan Yentob. The resulting documentary, Cracked Actor, featured a pasty and emaciated Bowie. The tour coincided with the singer's slide from heavy cocaine use into addiction, producing severe physical debilitation, paranoia, and emotional problems. He later commented that the accompanying live album, David Live, ought to be titled David Bowie is Alive and Well and Living Only in Theory. David Live nevertheless solidified Bowie's status as a superstar, charting at number 2 in the UK and number 8 in the US, and it also spawned a UK number 10 hit in Bowie's cover of Knock on Wood. After a break in Philadelphia where Bowie recorded new material, the tour resumed with a new emphasis in soul. The fruit of the Philadelphia recording sessions was Young Americans in 1975. Biographer Christopher Stanford writes, over the years, most British rockers had tried one way or another to become black by extension. Few have succeeded as Bowie did now. The album's sound, which the singer identified as plastic soul, constituted a radical shift in styles that initially alienated many of his UK devotees. Young American yielded Bowie's first U.S. number 1 fame, co-written with John Lennon, who contributed backing vocals, and Carlos Alomar. Lennon called Bowie's work great, but it's just rock and roll with lipstick on, earning the distinction of being one of the first white artists to appear on the U.S. variety show Soul Train. Bowie mimed fame as well as Golden Years, his November single, which was originally offered to Elvis Presley, who declined it. Young Americans was a commercial success in both the US and the UK, and a reissue of the 1969 single Space Oddity became Bowie's first number 1 hit in the UK a few months after Fame achieved the same in the US. Despite his by now well-established superstardom, Bowie, in the words of Stanford, for all his record sales, existed essentially on a loose change. In 1975, in a move echoing Ken Pitt's acrimonious dismissal 5 years earlier, Bowie fired his manager. At the culmination of the ensuing months-long legal dispute, he watched, as described by Stanford, millions of dollars of his future earnings being surrendered in what were unique, generous terms for defrays, then shut himself in West 20th Street, where for a week his house could be heard through the locked attic doors. Michael Lipman, Bowie's lawyer during the negotiations, became his new manager. Lipman, in turn, was awarded substantial compensation when Bowie fired him the following year. Station to Station, 1976, introduced a new Bowie persona, the Thin White Duke, of its title track. Visually, the character was an extension of Thomas Jerome Newton, the extraterrestrial being he portrayed in the film The Man Who Fell to Earth the same year. Developing the funky funk and soul of young Americans, Station to Station also prefigured the krautrock and synthesizer music of his next release. The extent to which drug addiction was now affecting Bowie was made public when Russell Hartley interviewed the singer for his London weekend television talk show in anticipation of the album's supporting tour. Shortly before the satellite-linked interview was scheduled to commence, the death of the Spanish dictator General Franco was announced. Bowie was asked to relinquish the satellite booking to allow the Spanish government to put out a live newsfeed. This he refused to do, and his interview went ahead. In the ensuing conversation with Hartley, as described by biographer David Bowie, the singer made hardly any sense at all throughout what was quite an extensive interview. Bowie looked completely disconnected and was hardly able to utter a coherent sentence. His sanity, by his own later admission, had become twisted from cocaine. He overdosed several times during the year and was withering physically to an alarming degree. Comments made by Bowie and others in 1976 led to the establishment of Rock Against Racism. Station to Station's January 1976 release was followed in February by a 3.5-month concert tour of Europe and North America, featuring a starkly light set. The Isolar 1976 tour highlighted songs from the album, including the dramatic and lengthy title track, the ballads Wild as a Wind and Word on a Wing, and the funkier TVC 15 and Stay. The core band that played around Bowie at the time of the album and tour were rhythm guitarist Almar, bassist George Murray, and drummer Dennis Davis, continued as a stable unit for the remainder of the 1970s. The tour was highly successful but mirrored in political controversy. Bowie was quoted in Stockholm as saying that Britain could benefit from a fascist leader and was detained by customs on the Russian-Polish border for possessing Nazi paraphernalia. Matters came to a head in London in May, what became known as the Victorian Station Incident. Arriving in an open-top Mercedes convertible, Bowie waved to the crowd in gesture that some alleged was a Nazi salute, which was captured on camera and published in NME. Bowie said that the photographer simply caught him in mid-wave. He later blamed his pro-fascism comments and his behavior during this period of his addiction and the character of the Thin White Duke. He said, "I was out of my mind, totally crazed. The main thing I was functioning on was my mythology. That whole thing about Hitler and rightism, I discovered King Arthur." According to playwright Alan Franks, writing later in the Times, he was indeed deranged. He had some very bad experiences with hard drugs. Before the end of 1976, Bowie's interest in the burgeoning German music scene as well as his drug addiction prompted him to move to West Berlin to clean up and revitalize his career. There, he was often seen riding a bicycle between his apartment in Schöneberg and Hansa Tune Studio, the recording studio he used, located near the Berlin Wall. While working with Brian Eno and shared an apartment with Iggy Pop, he began to focus on minimalist ambient music for the first of the 3 albums co-produced with Tony Visconti that became known as his Berlin Trilogy. During the same period, Iggy Pop, with Bowie as a co-writer and musician, completed his solo album debut, The Idiot, and its follow-up, Lust for Life, touring the UK, Europe, and the US in March and April of 1977. The album Low, which was released in 1977, partly influenced by the krautrock sound of Kraftwerk and Nuru, evidence a move away from narration in Bowie's songwriting to a more abstract musical form in which lyrics were sporadic and optional. Although he completed the album in November 1976, it took his unsettled record company another 3 months to release it. It received considerable negative criticism upon its release, a release which RCA, anxious to maintain the established commercial momentum, did not welcome, in which Bowie's ex-manager Donny DeFries, who still maintained a significant financial interest in the singer's affairs, tried to prevent. Despite these forebodings, Low yielded the UK number 3 single Sound and Vision, and its own performance surpassed that of Station to Station in the UK chart, where it reached number 2. Echoing Low's minimalist instrumental approach, the second of the trilogy, Heroes, incorporated pop and rock to a greater extent, seeing Bowie joined by guitarist Robert Fripp. Like Low, Heroes evinced the zeitgeist of the Cold War symbolized by the divided city of Berlin, incorporating ambient sounds from a variety of sources, including white noise generators, synthesizers, and koto. The album was another hit, reaching number 3 in the UK. Its title track, though only reaching number 24 in the UK singles charts, gained lasting popularity and within months had been released in Germany and French. Towards the end of the year, Bowie performed the song for Mark Bolan's television show Mark, and again 2 days later for Bing Crosby's final CBS Christmas special, where he joined Crosby in Peace on Earth, Little Drummer Boy, a version of the Little Drummer Boy with a new contrapuntal verse. 5 years later, the duet proved a worldwide sensational hit, charting in the UK at number 3 on Christmas Day 1982.